There exists a road in the middle of Tel Aviv that has been completely wiped from digital existence. You will not locate it on Google Maps. You will not find it on Russia's Yandex either. And here is what keeps me up at night thinking about this. It was not destroyed by any bomb or missile strike. This road physically exists right now, today, in one of the most heavily monitored cities anywhere on planet Earth. Yet two competing technology giants from two rival nations made the exact same independent choice to make it vanish from their platforms. No official statement, no public explanation, nothing but digital silence where concrete and asphalt actually stand. On March 11th, something happened that forces us to ask why that street matters so much. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps made a stunning public declaration. They announced their Kheibar Shekan missile had successfully penetrated Israeli defenses and struck what lies hidden beneath that erased road. Not the office towers you might see in photographs. Not the cafes where people once gathered for morning coffee. The target was far more significant. The buried military nerve center sitting directly underneath what intelligence analysts quietly refer to as Israel's own version of the Pentagon, only pushed deep underground where satellites cannot easily observe it. And what exactly did Israel say in response to this extraordinary Iranian claim? They sealed every road leading to the impact zone. They positioned security forces to physically block cameras from documenting anything. They issued zero official comments. Complete and total operational silence from one of the most media-savvy governments on Earth. Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of event requires that level of information suppression in the modern age of smartphones and instant global communication? Let that question settle into your mind for a moment before we continue. Throughout this video, I am going to walk you through absolutely everything that matters here. We will examine the devastating weapon system Iran deployed in this strike on Tel Aviv. We will analyze the precise target this Kheibar Shekan missile was specifically engineered to reach. We will trace the disturbing pattern of calculated silence that followed this attack on Netanyahu's war bunker. And I will explain exactly what that deliberate silence is communicating to every military planning office and defense ministry watching this situation unfold across the globe right now. Because what took place on day 12 of this escalating conflict fundamentally changes the strategic calculus for everyone involved. But here is what nobody is telling you, and honestly, it bothers me that more analysts are not screaming this from the rooftops. This is not the first time this exact pattern has played out. We have witnessed this precise information blackout before from the same government regarding the same location with the same suspicious timing. Before you can properly evaluate what Iran is claiming about this Kheibar Shekan strike, you absolutely need to understand two critical pieces of context. First, what exactly was the intended target of this devastating attack? Second, what specific weapon system was deployed to hit it? Let me walk you through the target identification first, because this is where the story becomes genuinely disturbing. Beneath the intersection of Leonardo da Vinci Street, positioned in the geographic heart of central Tel Aviv, sits a location that both Google Maps and Yandex Maps have independently made the deliberate decision to blur from their street view imagery and completely scrub of any identifying location metadata. What documented investigative research has uncovered, including construction records that were obtained through publicly accessible United States government files and detailed analytical reporting published across multiple credible international outlets, identifies this concealed location as Site 81. This installation represents approximately 6,000 square meters of electromagnetically shielded underground intelligence infrastructure, constructed with significant American financial investment, designed by specialized American military engineers, and hardened using technologies specifically intended to maintain continuous, secure communications, even if absolutely everything above ground level stops functioning entirely. This was not built to survive conventional attacks. This was engineered to survive sophisticated electronic warfare operations that could cripple surface-level systems. This was constructed to remain operational even after the complete loss of all surface infrastructure across the entire city. This facility was designed so that the military commanders and intelligence officers positioned inside it could continue directing an active war even after the entire world above them goes completely dark. Positioned directly adjacent to this installation, buried beneath the sprawling Israeli Ministry of Defense compound that military planners refer to as the Kirya, which functions as Israel's direct equivalent of the American Pentagon, sits a second critical underground installation that carries the operational designation Fortress of Zion. The New York Times received carefully controlled access to portions of this facility and subsequently described what their journalists witnessed as a sophisticated nerve center where approximately 70 personnel sat positioned across multiple elevated tiers, all of them facing enormous wall-mounted display screens, actively tracking live military strikes unfolding in real time across multiple theaters of operation. During periods of active military conflict, the respected Alma Research Center documented that thousands of Israeli soldiers worked within this underground complex around the clock, rotating through shifts to maintain constant operational readiness. That is precisely what Iran claims the Kheibar Shekan missile successfully struck on March 11th. That is the target sitting at the center of this entire geopolitical crisis that nobody in mainstream media seems willing to discuss with appropriate seriousness. Now, let me walk you through the weapon system itself, because understanding its capabilities changes everything about how we should interpret what happened. The missile Iran deployed in this operation carries the official designation Kheibar Shekan, which translates roughly to Fortress Buster in English. It is also referenced by its alternative classification as the Ghadar 4 when configured with its specialized cluster warhead payload. This particular weapon system first appeared publicly in Iran's operational missile arsenal during May 2023, representing years of development specifically designed to defeat Israeli defensive systems. Its confirmed operational range extends to approximately 2,000 kilometers, which places every single major Israeli population center and military installation comfortably within striking distance from launch positions located deep inside protected Iranian territory. The standard conventional warhead configuration weighs approximately 1,000 kilograms, making it roughly equivalent in explosive yield to the largest conventional bombs that aircraft dropped during the Second World War. We are talking about devastating destructive capability delivered with precision guidance across thousands of kilometers. But the cluster warhead configuration fundamentally transforms this Kheibar Shekan weapon into something categorically different from conventional ballistic missiles. At approximately 7 kilometers altitude during terminal descent, the primary warhead casing opens mechanically. It releases around 20 individual submunitions in a carefully calculated dispersal pattern, with each smaller warhead carrying approximately 2.5 kilograms of high explosive material. These submunitions spread across a dispersal zone covering a radius of 500 meters or more, saturating a densely built urban area with multiple simultaneous detonation points. I want you to think very carefully about what that tactical approach actually means in practice. A conventional warhead requires direct penetration through earth and concrete to threaten a deeply buried facility like Site 81 or the Fortress of Zion. Against reinforced concrete walls with sophisticated electromagnetic shielding, a surface detonation at an incorrect angle accomplishes almost nothing against infrastructure positioned far below ground level. The facility simply absorbs the blast and continues operating. But a cluster warhead operates on entirely different tactical principles. It does not attempt to penetrate hardened defenses directly. Instead, it saturates the entire surface footprint with overlapping destruction zones. It systematically shreds exposed ventilation shafts that buried facilities require to maintain breathable air. It destroys the communications antennae mounted at ground level that connect underground commanders with forces in the field. It collapses surface access points that personnel below require for entry and exit. It transforms the entire surface footprint above the buried facility into what military planners officially categorize as an area denial zone. This represents a location where absolutely no personnel above ground can survive the saturation bombardment, and simultaneously a location from which no personnel sheltering below ground can safely emerge into the devastated surface environment. The tactical implications of this approach are genuinely terrifying when you stop to consider them fully. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officially confirmed they deployed this Kheibar Shekan weapon during what their military communiques designated as the 19th wave of Operation True Promise. They publicly named central Tel Aviv as a primary target zone, along with Ben Gurion International Airport and the 27th Air Base of the Israeli Air Force as additional strike objectives. Israeli firefighters responded to 2 confirmed cluster submunition impact zones in central Israel following this attack. A first responder working the scene described finding a civilian victim with severe shrapnel wounds, which represents the signature injury pattern that military medical experts associate specifically with submunition dispersal from cluster munitions. The weapon deployment is confirmed through multiple independent sources. The target has been documented through extensive investigative research. The Iranian claim is extraordinarily specific in its details. What happened in the immediate aftermath of this strike is where this story takes a significantly darker and more disturbing turn that demands our careful attention. Here is what you absolutely need to understand about the wall of silence currently emanating from Tel Aviv regarding this Kheibar Shekan strike. This is not some unprecedented response to an unusual situation. This is a carefully rehearsed playbook, and we have witnessed this exact pattern deployed before under remarkably similar circumstances. Travel back with me to June 2025 during the 12-day war that preceded this current conflict. An Iranian ballistic missile struck the Da Vinci complex located in central Tel Aviv. This is the exact same city block sitting directly above the buried Site 81 installation I described earlier. The Jerusalem Post later reported, using very carefully chosen language, that the missile impact landed what they described as a stone's throw from what was at that time Prime Minister Netanyahu's working office. Let that specific detail settle into your understanding for a moment. A ballistic missile, Netanyahu's office where he directed military operations, a stone's throw separating them. What exactly happened in the immediate aftermath of that remarkably close strike? Israeli security authorities sealed the entire surrounding area to all civilian and media access. Camera crews were physically blocked from documenting anything within the impact zone. No official statement was ever issued by any government spokesperson. No confirmation of what occurred, no denial of Iranian claims, just complete and absolute operational silence maintained for weeks. And then, only after considerable time had passed, the Prime Minister's office complex began undergoing what government sources described publicly as routine renovations, requiring temporary relocation. To this very day, the satellite imagery covering that particular section of Tel Aviv remains officially censored on major mapping platforms. France 24 conducted an independent journalistic analysis and reached the conclusion that Israeli media coverage of that June 2025 strike had likely been deliberately delayed through coordinated government pressure. One major Israeli news outlet waited a full 2 weeks before publishing any reporting whatsoever about the missile impact, even after photographs documenting the strike damage had already circulated extensively across international social media platforms. 2 entire weeks of silence in the modern age of smartphones capturing everything and satellite internet transmitting globally. 2 weeks of coordinated information suppression. Now advance forward to March 11th, 2026, which marks day 12 of this current escalating war. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announces publicly that their Kheibar Shekan missiles successfully struck the underground command infrastructure buried beneath the Kirya compound, the exact same geographic zone targeted previously, the exact same critical military target identified in their claims, the exact same specific accusation leveled against Israeli defensive capabilities. And Israel's official response follows an identical pattern: sealed streets preventing access, blocked cameras preventing documentation, no official comment acknowledging anything occurred. The response is identical down to the smallest operational detail. Now, here is precisely where this analysis becomes genuinely uncomfortable, because this is the moment where most mainstream commentators stop their examination and conclude dismissively that since Iran has provided no photographic evidence, their claim is probably just propaganda designed for domestic consumption. That lazy conclusion completely ignores the mirror sitting directly in front of anyone willing to look honestly at the full picture. On March 6th, exactly 5 days before Iran made its dramatic Kirya claim, the Israeli military did something remarkably different in its own offensive operations. Approximately 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets dropped around 100 precision munitions on the underground bunker complex, housing the Iranian leadership compound positioned in central Tehran. The Israeli Defense Forces released detailed footage documenting the attack. They announced the total destruction of the targeted facility. They explained that the bunker extended beneath multiple city streets and contained meeting rooms, secured entry points, and command chambers actively used by Iran's most senior political and military leadership. According to detailed reporting from the Alma Research Center, Israel's elite intelligence units, specifically Unit 8200 handling signals intelligence and Unit 9900 specializing in visual intelligence analysis, had spent years meticulously mapping every corridor and chamber of that Iranian facility before the strike order was finally authorized. Israel released comprehensive evidence supporting their claims. Iran has produced nothing comparable for its Kirya strike assertion. But understand very carefully what you are actually comparing when you examine these two situations side by side. One government deliberately chose transparency and documentation. The other government deliberately chose silence and information suppression. And the government that chose complete silence this time is the exact same government that chose identical silence the last time a missile landed a stone's throw from its prime minister's working office. The absence of publicly released evidence is absolutely not equivalent to the absence of an actual event occurring. Not in a conflict where both governments are engaged in systematic information management and perception warfare. Not when the previous Iranian strike on that exact same location produced the identical sealed streets, the identical blocked cameras, the identical mysteriously delayed media coverage. Not when Google Maps and Yandex Maps still stubbornly refused to display the precise area where that June 2025 missile reportedly landed and detonated. Then there is the deeply troubling Beit Shemesh data point that almost nobody is discussing with appropriate seriousness. On March 1st, a missile carrying approximately 500 kilograms of high explosives collapsed an underground civilian bomb shelter that was accessible by descending 2 full flights of stairs below street level. 9 civilians were killed in that single strike. Let that number sit with you and consider its full implications. 9 people sheltering in a facility specifically engineered and constructed to protect them from exactly this type of attack. 2 flights below street level. Gone in an instant. If a hardened civilian shelter positioned 2 flights underground could not survive a direct missile hit, what does a military command center actually require to guarantee survival? And how confident should any honest analyst be that those extraordinarily demanding requirements were fully met in the construction of Site 81 and the Fortress of Zion? One additional variable that almost no mainstream analyst is discussing deserves serious attention. The man currently making Iran's strategic targeting decisions is Mojtaba Khamenei, who had served as supreme leader for less than 4 days at the precise moment this Kirya strike was ordered. This is a leader who has never held any public political office in his entire life. He inherited this escalating war from a father who was killed before the conflict reached its current devastating scale. He has never been tested at this level of crisis leadership. He has everything to prove to domestic audiences and regional allies, and he possesses no established pattern of strategic restraint to constrain his decision-making. The sealed streets of Tel Aviv represent far more than simply an information gap in our understanding. They constitute a deliberate signal being transmitted to every intelligence agency and military planning office worldwide. And the signal communicates this unmistakable message. Something significant happened on day 12 of this war that at least one government has decided the world is not yet permitted to witness or fully understand. Here is the part where most geopolitical analysts completely lose their audience. They keep their analysis floating at 30,000 feet altitude, speaking abstractly about military doctrine and regional stability frameworks. They never connect their observations to the things that actually matter to ordinary people watching from thousands of miles away. Your personal savings sitting in retirement accounts, your daily cost of living expenses, the price you paid at the gas station just this morning filling your vehicle. So let me bring this analysis down to ground level, where you actually live your life. Iran has launched more than 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and conducted over 2,000 separate drone operations since February 28th of this year. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed these numbers publicly through statements to Fars news agency on March 5th. Of that staggering total, approximately 40% was directed against targets inside Israel. The remaining 60% was directed against American military positions scattered across the Persian Gulf region. Read that percentage again and let it fully register. 60% of Iranian strikes targeted American positions in the Gulf. The Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz are not abstract geography existing only on military planning maps. Approximately 20% of the entire world's oil supply transits through that narrow strait every single day without exception. Every tanker carrying Saudi crude oil, every liquefied natural gas shipment heading toward European markets, every barrel keeping Asian manufacturing operations running smoothly. All of it moves through a maritime channel that measures only 39 kilometers wide at its narrowest navigable point. And Iran has missiles, naval mines, and fast attack boats strategically positioned along both shores of that critical waterway. Intelligence analysts are now examining a scenario that global oil markets have not yet fully priced into current valuations. If Iran makes even a tactical, localized decision to contest that waterway's freedom of navigation, the price of crude oil does not rise gradually over weeks of adjustment. It moves violently in hours. The last time serious Hormuz disruption risk entered market consciousness during January 2020, Brent crude jumped 6% in a single trading session. That was merely a near-miss incident. This is an active shooting war with missiles flying daily. Now layer the command coherence question directly on top of that energy security concern. If the Kirya's underground command infrastructure has been degraded even partially, even temporarily, what exactly does Israeli decision-making look like in the next 72 critical hours? Because a military command layer that is uncertain about its own communications reliability does not produce measured, carefully calibrated responses to provocations. It produces fast decisions made under extreme pressure, and fast decisions made under pressure in a nuclear-adjacent regional conflict have a specific historical track record that should concern everyone watching from any distance. Then there is the THAAD question that military analysts are debating intensely. The Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Battery that was previously positioned inside Israeli territory has been withdrawn. The strategic implications of this removal are still being officially debated. But what is not being debated is what its absence means mathematically for Israeli defensive capabilities. Fewer intercept layers protecting critical infrastructure. Higher statistical probability of warhead penetration for the next Iranian salvo. Higher probability that the next major strike produces a result that simply cannot be sealed behind blocked cameras and hastily renovated office buildings. Financial markets hate uncertainty, but they typically price uncertainty into valuations slowly over time. What markets absolutely cannot handle, what historically produces the sharpest and most violent corrections, is certainty arriving without any advance warning. A confirmed strike on critical command infrastructure, a Hormuz navigation incident, a catastrophic miscalculation by a 24-year-old supreme leader with no established pattern of strategic restraint and everything to prove to watching audiences. You do not need to work as an energy trader to feel viscerally what potentially comes next. You simply need to fill your car with fuel. You need to heat your home this winter. You need your supply chains to function reliably delivering goods to stores. Every single one of those basic necessities runs on the assumption that the Strait of Hormuz stays open to commercial traffic, that the Persian Gulf remains safely navigable, and that no government involved in this escalating conflict makes a decision in the next 72 hours that absolutely cannot be walked back diplomatically. Right now, none of those critical assumptions are guaranteed, and the people who should be informing you about these risks honestly are busy managing what you are permitted to see and understand. Here is precisely where we stand on day 12 of this expanding war. Both sides are fighting simultaneously on two distinct levels of conflict. There is the visible war that everyone can observe, consisting of press releases, satellite footage, and official casualty counts. And there is the invisible war occurring beneath the surface, involving buried command architecture, sealed streets, and satellite mapping platforms that still stubbornly refuse to show you what infrastructure exists underneath them. Iran desperately needs its Kirya strike claim to be believed by international audiences. Israel desperately needs that same claim to be doubted and dismissed. Neither government will ever confirm the actual truth because the honest answer in either direction fundamentally changes the strategic calculus of everything that follows. Allies would recalibrate their support, enemies would accelerate their planning, markets would move dramatically, decisions would get made in rooms that no camera will ever be permitted to see. The sophisticated nerve center that Israel spent decades constructing and burying beneath central Tel Aviv, is it still fully intact and operational? And if it is not, who is actually directing this war right now from which location? That question does not have any public answer yet, but it eventually will. Information of this magnitude does not stay sealed indefinitely regardless of government efforts. It leaks through unexpected channels. It surfaces in classified document releases. It arrives without warning, exactly like the Kheibar Shekan missiles that prompted this entire disturbing question in the first place. When that information finally emerges, you will want to already be here understanding the context.